First, can you state your name?
Of course. My name is Nathaniel Curtis Jones, Sr., former of the United States Air Force. My discharge date, I got the rank of major.
And I'm just gonna ask you a few questions about your experience and your time in the war. First of all, can you describe the physical surroundings of like where you were?
Yes, at my entry level, I was at a base called Lackland Air Force Base. This is in San Antonio, Texas. This is where just about every Air Forceman who goes into the military takes their basic training. And from there you go to what's called a tech school, depending on your proficiency level at the time of graduation and according to your proficiency level. And then you're reclassified and go to the area of your expertise.
And what were you? Did you experience any type of warfare when you?
Yes, I did. I was in the Vietnam era war, and I was stationed at Saigon Air Base in Vietnam, South Vietnam.
And what was that like for you?
On my arrival there, it was sort of surprising because we arrived at the main city, and I was really surprised because my expectations were to look for what we call a boondocks, which is more of a forest area, or actual war zone where the bombs and shells and what have you would be exploding. But on the contrary, it was a city very similar to downtown New Orleans, capital Baton Rouge, Las Vegas area, tall buildings, nice surroundings. We were totally surprised at the city itself because we were actually looking for an area of war.
And how did that affect you guys' mentality on what you would be doing?
On arrival there, it was very great. After arrival, and we went to what we call base operations, when we actually were assigned to a specific duty area in the base area where I was located. It was about 10 miles outside of what we call the city limits. And there, our exposure to the actual fighting, the boondocks area, more of a countryside, water buffaloes, horses, cows, pigs, chickens, very rough terrain.
No. Did you voluntarily go to the war, or were you drafted?
I volunteered for the Air Force because I was under draft notification from the Army, and I really did not want to go into the Army.
And how did you feel about the enemy? Like, were you aware of what you were there fighting for?
Prior to going to Vietnam, I was stationed in a city called Eiffel, Germany. And at the time of my tenureship in the Air Force, this was back in the late 60s, early 70s. And this was a time where we had just come through the civil rights era. Things were starting to level off for the black Negro. So we were, how would you say, we endured a lot of prejudice, a lot of unsatisfactory situations on our bases. So where I was in Germany is very unsatisfactory. So I actually volunteered to go to Vietnam just to get out of the base where I was.
And how did this affect you, like medically and mentally? Like, how were you affected from the war?
Medically, during the Tet Offensive, our base was attacked. In fact, that was it was on the news all over. It was a pretty traumatic event. The whole countryside is what they call the Vietnam New Year's. And our base, and just about every base in South Vietnam was attacked. And I lost one of my good friends in that attack. The area where I was situated, one of my associate officers asked me to relocate to a different area. And where I had just relocated from, it was exploded. So had I not gotten that order, I wouldn't be sitting here now. So it's just, thank God that order came true because it's a pretty traumatic experience.
What do you think? What do you think you went to the war for? Because in class, my teacher was telling us how the government was saying that the war was for one thing, and that people were going to the war for a different thing, and that the people who you were fighting against were fighting for a different thing. So what was your reason? What did you think that you were fighting for, and did that change from what you were actually fighting for?
There are two aspects of that war: the civilian aspect, the military aspect. Let me give you the military first. In the military, man, it's under orders, and unless you're the top general, which I was nowhere close to, you were under orders. So you were there to follow orders, regardless of what those orders were. If you were given a specific order, you were commanded to follow that order. There were a few subordinates that did what they thought they wanted to do, but when you're in the military, you're there to follow orders no matter how traumatic they are, no matter how abrupt they are, no matter how bad you think they are, or no matter how good you think they are. You're under orders. Mm-hmm. And I'll leave that point. Now, from a civilian standpoint, we had news reports over there just as Americans did back in what we call back in the States. But because Vietnam is overseas, you should wear Southeast Asia. So from the civilian standpoint, at that time, President Johnson, a few other members of Congress, our General Westmoreland, was under the orders of the congressional staff out of America. South Vietnam was trying to gain their democracy from North Vietnam, which was under communists. Vietnam was a country that was cut in half. The North Vietnam was part of Russia, or controlled by the Russians and Chinese. South Vietnam naturally was controlled by England, France, all the democratic nations. America was not the only military aid in Vietnam. We had a lot of other countries there: England, France, Israel, a few more countries that my mind escapes because it's been so long ago. But it was a coalition of military folks there.
Did you leave behind family members when you went overseas?
Oh no, thank God.
And I know you listed the places you were stationed. Were you stationed anywhere else other than where you trained?
Prior to Vietnam, I was stationed in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, Kingsville Air Force Base. From there to International Falls to Duluth, Minnesota. From there to Eiffel, Germany. To Stevenage, England. To Taiwan, Taipei, Japan, the Philippines, Hawaii, and my discharge base was Barksdale Air Base, which is here in Louisiana.
And under any other circumstances, would you go back to any of those places, like just to visit, like if you weren't in a war? Because I know how when you fight, you travel a lot of places, and you don't really get to see the places that you like fight in. Would you go back to like maybe look at them, like after, to recap?
I would love to revisit Vietnam. That's a beautiful country with very nice people there. The conflict Vietnam has is very similar to what's going on now in Africa with apartheid. It's just a matter of different cultures of people. But I would love to revisit there. There are a few places in the United States I would love to go to, with the exception of Sault Ste. Marie. I'm not an advocate of cold weather, and it was very cold in that area.
And, are there any important lessons you learned while you were like away?
Main lesson was good piece of advice my mother gave me before I left. She told me, son, you're going in the military to take orders and not to give orders. And that stuck with me throughout my entire tenure in the Air Force. It was very difficult, and I think if I hadn't followed my mother's rules, I would have been in serious trouble.
How long did you serve in
active duty? I served 8 years. In active duty, 13 years.
And can you list some of the benefits of being a veteran of a war?
Tremendous benefits. For the male, you have what is now locally called a GI Bill. GI Bill contains benefits where you can get aid and assistance to purchase a home. There are a lot of educational benefits that you can apply for. Medical benefits is unlimited depending on your tenureship or your disability if you're fortunate enough not to have one. For the female, it's almost like unlimited. She has total medical care. She has enormous amount of educational benefits. They can continue their career if they choose to after pregnancy, or should they have any type of difficulty with the pregnancy or choose to marry. The time when I was in, it was difficult for the female airman to maintain a family.
Mm-hmm.
It was more or less on the man's side. But not being a chauvinistic person, that's just how it was in that time frame. Now, in this day and age, in the millennium, I would say it's very advantageous. I would strongly suggest any young person, especially people with disciplinary problems, a young person who doesn't have any direction of where they want to go with their life, if they're not sure if they want to attend a tech school or a college to further their education, the military is a good tool. First of all, it teaches discipline, it teaches personal awareness, gives you self-satisfaction, and it really teaches you how to cope with what we call civilian life or the outside world.
And that actually led to my next question. Do you think the war was good for you as you being you? Do you think it was a good experience for you?
At that time or right now?
Both.
Both. Right now it would be perfect. If you notice in the news media, you see a lot of black Afro-Americans in the military. A lot of them now have the opportunity to go into officer training school and become officers instead of just enlisted personnel. You have a very big advantage being an officer now in the military. Of course, back in my day, as I said, that was during the civil rights era. A lot of prejudice were there, a lot of difficulties were there, but we did overcome. Very rough.
Thank you for your time.
You're
I
very welcome.
appreciate it very much.
Thank you for asking.